much for tuning in. Got to play with my stuff here. Thank you so much for tuning in. Really, really appreciate it. Thank you so much for tuning in. Really, really appreciate it. Of course, as always, make sure that you do me a favor and hit that rate, subscribe, and share button. Please hit that rate, subscribe, and share button. Getting a lot more followers. Really, really appreciate it. I'm going to keep trying to give you guys the best content that is available. You know how we're doing it. We're over here trying to make men the best versions of themselves that they can be, making sure that men are becoming the best versions of themselves that they can be. So over here in this space, I was listening to a person I really find very, very entertaining and informing at the same time, very informational. Word, very educational. Very educational, and he is known as the master teacher, BGS. I believe that stands for Black Gnostic Speaks, and he's reading articles and he gives his opinion about things. Senior, not senior, he's a mature brother who in my estimation is worth listening to. So I was going through, so I was listening to something that he had posted 4 years ago. I didn't realize how long ago it was, but he still got up and, you know, in my estimation, doesn't get enough views, particularly for those of us who are trying to become the best versions of ourselves. And let me. I just kind of thought about this. Let me tell you why I think that this space, so-called, is important. Because many of us, unfortunately, grew up in single-parent homes or grew up with issues along the way, and we you know, I myself grew up without a father. I did have good, strong role models and deacons at my church. I had uncles. My mother put me into the boys club. During the summers, we went to the YMCA day camp. So there was always some type of male presence around. But for a lot of individuals, they grew up without this benefit, and they end up suffering, right? You look at many of the statistics that we can go through, and I don't know if I'll get to it today, but as far as drug abuse, as far as mental health, as far as you know, incarceration rates, arrest rates, just overall sociability rates, right? A lot of these links, and particularly in men, black men in especiality, are linked to lack of fathers in a home or lack of a male presence in their life. So this is why I think that this space is important, because it's getting us to talk to each other, to open up about things and issues that we were going through that we didn't think that anybody else was going through. There's a saying that we thought we had to John Henry our way through this, right? We didn't understand how to relate to our women in a proper way, how to, if we became fathers, how to relate to them, how to relate to our loved ones, how to be good co-workers, how to become good bosses, just relate in a society, right? So if we're missing something, it becomes very, very important somewhere along the line that we break these chains, break these cycles, and become better versions, right? We gotta move on. So that's why this space in particular, I think, is really, really important. I know that I'm constantly looking for new videos that I think are educational, or anything that I think that it can improve, I can look to and improve to become a better version of myself. As far as my relationships, be a better father to my kids, grandfather if I ever get them. Hint, hint to those my kids listening. So just to be a better version of myself, and that's really, really important. That's why I think that this space has been vital within the last year. I know that it's been taking some knocks here and there, and it's not perfect, but it's a place where we can talk, we can open up, we can share our feelings, our emotions, let people know that you're not alone, and that you are part of a community that shares your pain, shares your trauma, shares your some of your past histories, and we're going to get through this thing together. So I'm listening to Brother BGS, and something he did. So this is the thumbnail, and it says, "Are we feminizing boys?" Right? It's on YouTube. Are we feminizing boys? Right? Got here, say Black Boys, BGS, IBMOR. I forget what the IBMOR stands for. I think it's Intelligent Brothers, something. I don't know. I don't know what it stands for. I don't know. But anyway, so check it out. So anyway, I'm not going to play the video, but he talks about a particular particular article. And here's the article, right? Feminizing boys as we masculinize girls. Remember, this is from 4 years ago. This was posted March 29th, 2018 from Psychology Today. So what I did was I went through Psychology Today, Are We Feminizing Boys? Just right to try to look for the article. And of course, this is the top one that comes up, right? But take a look at the articles that are underneath it, right? All within the realm or the framework of of how we're raising boys and men, right? Impact of gender expectations on boys and young men, gender psychology today, boys will be boys, moving beyond toxic masculinity, whatever that is. Masculinity is not our enemy. I might have to read this one, right? This is from 2019. I might have to read that one. I want to read a couple of these. Now, I have not read them yet, so I want to kind of read them cold and kind of give my opinion as I'm reading them, right? What is masculinity and how do psychologists measure it? Real men don't write blogs. Are we feminizing our boy? Here, this is from a couple years later. This is from the Manila Bulletin. Men, a growing minority from American Psychological Association, right? So a bunch of stuff here, right? So we go to this one. Here's another one. I typed in Psychology Today, men, masculinity, because I couldn't remember what was going on, right? And it's some of the same articles, right? What is masculinity and how do psychologists measure it? Moving beyond toxic masculinity. What is toxic masculinity? Developing positive masculinity. I think I clicked on that. We might read that one. The first three instincts of masculinity, why masculinity doesn't have to be toxic, how forced masculinity affects sensitive men, highly sensitive men, right? All of these are from Psychology Today, most of them anyway. 10 rules for modern masculinity, Psychology Today. This is definitely one I want to read. The myth of toxic masculinity, mental health among boys and men. What is masculinity, right? This is something that I dealt with. I mean, I'm going to be honest with that. You got to be honest and upfront, right? Something that I dealt with, not so much the mental health aspect, but understanding what it takes to be a man when you haven't really seen that in a constant presence in your life. And listen, I think that my upbringing, in comparison to others that I've talked to, was fairly good. Good, strong deacons in my church, brothers who had jobs, brothers who I lived in the inner city. These men lived. Some of them lived in more affluent areas with their families, blackmen. So this is, and then, of course, like I said, being at the boys' club, we had our I forget what the term was, but let's just call them counselors. I don't think we call them counselors. They were, men, and we're all trying to get to this place together, right? Masculine energy, integrated men, step by step. Masculinity, is there really a crisis? How much does the masculinity matter? Masculinity is not our enemy. So a bunch of different articles from Psychology Today. And there's one in particular that I wanted to take a look at. I don't see it right now. The importance of positive masculinity in therapy for men. I might read that one a little bit later. So anyway, so we'll take a look at some of these articles, right? So some of them I have queued up already. And let's see. Okay, let's take a look at this one. The myth of toxic masculinity. As again, I haven't read this. So this is from Michael Carson, PhD, JD, right? Last year, 2022. The term toxic masculinity usually refers to paranoia, sociopathy, malignant narcissism, or self-righteous vindictiveness. Traits are as common in women as in men, although in men they may be more likely to express as physical violence. To blame something like violence simply on a person's maleness is inaccurate and reveals bias. Children, regardless of gender, should be raised to own, accept, and master their own aggressiveness rather than hate it. Again, I haven't read this article, so I don't know if I'm going to agree with it or disagree with it, but let's kind of power through this. The lead article in APA's flagship journal this month calls for redefining masculinity for what it calls hegemonic masculinity, meaning toxic masculinity, to something more, feminine. Oppression and violence are blamed on toxic masculinity, and boys, according to their article, should be raised in relationships of empathy, mutuality, and empowerment. No, they don't need No, they don't mean sports teams, dojos, or the military, although it's unclear why not, since those organizations certainly provide relationships of that sort. What they mean is that boys should be less, boyish. Remember, I was listening to something talking about, are we feminizing the boys, right? So we want to get them away from the military dojos, and sports teams where boys typically thrive, but, what do we want them to do? Well, not be so boyish. Examining the definition of masculinity, the desirability of masculinity, like anything else, depends on how you define it. If you think it means beating up defenseless victims, and I get the distinct impression that that is exactly how the APA sees masculinity, then it seems like a bad thing. If you mean standing up for what is right, it's a little harder to see how there can be too much of that, right? Absolutely agree with that. Absolutely agree with that. Remember, two of these articles deal with masculinity, mental health among boys. One is masculinity toxic, and I think the other one was what was the other one? Do I have it? No. Let's see. What was the other article that I wanted to read? The importance of positive masculinity in therapy for men. You want to talk about why men don't go to therapy? You want to talk about when men don't feel validated in opening up, expressing their emotions, crying, whatever. It's because the American Psychological Association, as we're reading right now, is wanting to redefine masculinity, tell you to stop being so boyish, tell you to stop being manly, and views it as a negative, as you just want to go around beating up people and kicking puppies and whatnot. This is not This is not what my definition of masculinity would be, should be, or is, and I would not associate with anyone who thinks that. Here's one description of masculinity from the detective novel Little Things. I like providing for my family, I like being right, and I like sex. I'm proud of my success, and I don't feel guilty about other people's suffering unless I caused it. I think it's more important to be funny than to be tender. I don't think you hurt my feelings is a valid argument. When people, and that was a quote from a detective novel. When people talk about, we're back to the article today. When people talk about toxic masculinity, they don't mean masculinity at all, unless usually they mean paranoia, sociopathy, malignant narcissism, or some form of self-righteous vindictiveness. They are as common in women as in men, although in men these ills are more likely to be expressed as physical violence, though still at a low rate. Don't forget that part, still a low rate. But to blame the violence on the maleness rather than say the paranoia of the perpetrator is like blaming robbery and murder on the race of the perpetrator. When faced with the image of a school shooter, if you hate men, you see a man. If you like men, you see a paranoid person. If you hate black people, you look at violent crime data. A disproportionate number of robberies and murders are committed by black people. You see race when you look at the perpetrators rather than rage. Masculinity is a good thing in both men and women, but it is not well suited to every situation. But that is not the fault of masculinity any more than it is the fault of negotiation, rationality, democracy, that they are well suited to every situation. You wouldn't call it toxic democracy when the majority rule insufficiently protects the rights of the minority. Instead, you might call it a problem with humanity, a species that tends to abuse and exploit power, and any group or individual that has it. Madison wrote, "If men were angels, no government would be necessary. If angels were to govern men, neither external nor internal controls of government would be necessary." If you hate democracy, you might call it a problem protecting the minority, toxic democracy. You still might suggest that democracy can learn something from its dictatorships. If you love democracy, self-rule, you might remind people that implication for child rearing goes on through this. And So I don't want to continue on reading with that, but I think that it's important that we take a look at this type of thing. So let's take a look at the 10 rules for modern masculinity. Let's see if I agree with this. I don't know what this guy, he doesn't have his credentials up here, so he just says Mike A. Fair on purpose, right? So let's does he list them out here? I gotta if he doesn't list them, okay. In summary, the 2021 mentorship research specifically points to the following 10 core behaviors for men who want to find a healthy identity in masculinity. We see these points as the foundation for a new playbook or modern masculinity. I haven't read this. Let's see if I agree. Listen and expose yourself to opinions that are different from your own in the media and in art. I agree with that. Meet and discuss with people who have different political and worldviews. I agree with that. Expose yourself to travel in different cultures in as many ways as possible. 3 for 3. Always check the source of information that you're being served and do as much independent thinking and cross-checking as possible. On a roll. Bring your attention to what you can do in your family, relationships, and the way you conduct business in terms of treating others, and find ways to become an ally to women. No problem so far. Strive to find higher purpose in situations rather than seek to understand what divides. This is best done by identifying high-level goals that might unite rather than divide. Number 7, refrain from divisive political terminology. Terms such as left or right, conservative or liberal. I hate those terms. I hate that. I hate it. I hate that we are so bifurcated. I hate that we talk about the left wing and right wing and those in the middle and all this kind of. I totally agree. We got to stop thinking along those lines. I think that we should think along the lines of what's best for humanity. As long as we continue to place ourselves in bubbles and in boxes of being a male and being female, of being black, of being white, of being Latino, of being where you stand on the political spectrum about being red or blue or an elephant or a donkey or right wing, or crazy. Create conversation with your partner about your goals, common goals, roles, and then revisit the discussion on a regular basis. Continue to develop your own understanding of what masculinity and being a modern man mean to you. Seek ways to integrate the two sides traditionally referred to as yin and yang or masculine and feminine in yourself, that you can be more whole human being rather than a follower of your own cultural and societal programming. Don't go it alone. Reach out for professional help to coaches, men's groups, and therapists. Okay, this brother is a psychologist and serial entrepreneur, whatever that means. He is a coach and a facilitator who helps organizations and individuals discover their higher purpose and connect for two better results in spirits, right? So I can't say I disagree with anything that he wrote right there. So as we continue on looking at this, right? So this is a brother out here. His name is Richard Reeves, as you can see right here. Richard Reeves. He's got a bunch of videos on YouTube. He was on Real Time with Bill Maher. He wrote a book, Why Men and Boys Are Struggling, of Boys and Men, Richard Reeves review. So I did want to read a little bit of this, right? So this is from something called IF Studies. I think it's something Family Studies. The IF, what does this stand for? Oh, Institute for Family Studies, right? Right diagnosis, wrong prescription. Richard Reeves of Boys and Men. Haven't read this, but when I saw the word wrong, I'm assuming that somebody wants to disagree with it. So let's take a look at this. What this says. I don't know if you guys can see it out there. I'm trying to make it a little bit bigger here. It is not exactly unknown that boys. I hate those double negatives. It's known that boys and men are struggling in America, probably in the West too. Make sure you guys can see all this. Okay. A number of books have already been written on the topic, from Warren Farrell's The Boy Crisis to Kay Heimowitz's Manning Up. But much of this work to date has come from people who are somewhat marginal to the mainstream conversation, often conservatives. Okay, I don't know if that's... okay, so this might be a conservative because they're saying that conservatives are marginal. Again, hate that term, but okay, so nobody's paying attention to them. So nobody's paying attention to the conservatives when they speak. It's kind of just fly over countries. Let's just kind of get rid of them. They're not the elite, right? The East Coast and West Coast elites, right? The conservatives. Richard Reeves' new book on the topic of Boys and Men is different in that, while it covers much of the same ground, it's from a senior fellow at the Brookings Institute, the most establishment center-left think tank, which makes it a mainstream book. Reeves provides an overview of the data on the male underperformance that's well known to social scientists and many institutional insiders, but not especially present in the public discourse. For example, men's real wages have declined by 14% since 1979, while women's wages have grown. Labor force participation by prime working age men has declined, right? A lot of more boys are just want to just stay home and just play video games. Nobody wants to enter the workforce. With 9 million prime working age men not in the labor force, even prior to COVID-19, boys underperforming in school and are attending college at rates much lower than women. Let me pause here. And I did pull this up. I don't know if I'll be able to show this. Is it here? Okay. Let me see if I can see. Okay, so I was able to make it available on my browser here. Okay, so this is titled "The Missing." I won't be able to get all this. So anyway, so this is titled "The Missing Men on Campus: Chronicle of Higher Education." Right. So this comes to me from the school that I'm actually finishing up right now, and you can see what it says here. It says the missing men on campus. The gender gap in college enrollment has been growing for decades. In 1970, men accounted for 59% of college students. By 2019, that had essentially flip-flopped, with women accounting for 57% of enrollment. Last spring, 400,000 fewer males enrolled in college than in the spring of 2020. A drop nearly doubles that for females. The Missing Men on Campus features news stories, analysis, advice, and opinion essays, including several articles that sounded warning years ago. Years ago. It also looks at how some colleges are trying to draw more men of all backgrounds and help them succeed once they get there. Read about the pandemic-wide and order your copy today. I was going to order a copy, but it's tad bit expensive. So I'm going to continue on with this article, and I want to pause there to show you that article, that this is a problem because my school, of course, it's, the school I'm going to, they probably just send it out, but this is something that has been noticed for years. It's been talked about for years. It's been known among social scientists that men are leaving the labor market. Men aren't going to college. Men don't see any priority with joining these forces, right? They don't see any need to do these things, right? And they're opting out and refusing to participate in society. And this is a problem and is going to continue with the problem. Women earned 15% more bachelor's degrees than men in 2019. Rees also specifically chronicles the fortunes of black boys and men, which have fallen farthest. The number of black men in prison is particularly alarming. Of low-income black men born in 1980, 1 out of every 7, or 16%, were in prison 30 years later. I seriously doubt those statistics. I just don't believe those statistics. I have a hard time believing those. One study I read said it was a projection, but the way that this is phrased here is saying that it is that, and I just don't believe that 1 out of 7 men were in prison, not been arrested, spent a weekend in prison, in jail or anything, but in prison. And a lot of times when you look at those numbers, right, these arrest rates and who's being incarceration rates, right, they're played with, right? Sometimes they're classified as how many people are booked over a weekend, how many people are in a county lockup because they can't pay bail. So the numbers are different depending on, you really have to look at how these numbers are come together. So I really doubt that 1 out of every 7 black men are in prison. I just don't believe that. Reeves emphasizes not that they had been to prison, but that they were in prison. Yeah. Okay. I got to take a look at that. I have to take a look at that. The book also notes the hostility society often directs at men today, such as labeling perfectly normal male behavior as toxic masculinity. This is part of an even-handed critique of both liberals and conservatives by Reeves, explaining how each side has failed to adequately address the plight of males. Liberals, for example, tend to blame men as individuals, overlooking the structural disadvantages men sometimes face. He notes men were more likely to die from COVID-19 than women, for example, and although he acknowledges the unique biological differences between men and women, he thinks conservatives make too much of these differences, while progressives try to deny or ignore them. In easy-to-read and compelling prose, Reeves does a great job of laying out the problems facing boys and men. He should be congratulated for his high-quality writing. I have not read this book yet. I do plan to read it. I was reading something, or watching something, and it said when a guy is really interested, and when you want to be seen as less confrontational or intimidating as men, they tend to have higher their pitches in their voices, and etc. Interesting stuff. So I don't think there's anything wrong with being masculine. I don't think we should have to apologize for being masculine. I think it's something to be lauded, something to be praised, and something to be sought for. Now, I'm not saying that there's anything with men who are less masculine or more feminine. I often don't like when people make fun of the arts or artsy type of people. I actually don't like that. I think that those guys are men, and they make some. If it wasn't for them, we wouldn't be able to go to plays. A lot of actors. When you look at when you look at a lot of actors, and you watch them as they are, giving interviews. They're not overly, masculine, football playing men. They're kind of soft and soft spoken, and they get up there and they act in a certain role in a certain manner. So I don't like that those type of men are made fun of. But at the same time, I don't think that there's anything wrong with being a man or being masculine or getting what you want. And if you're a woman and you want to be more feminine, you want to be more masculine because you think that that's going to help you achieve what you want to achieve in life, well, then go for it. I'm not exactly sure how it's going to affect your love life. Matter of fact, I know it's not going to. I know it's probably going to be detrimental to it, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't get what you want and do what you want to be and be the best version of yourself that you should be. Remember, this is about being the best version of you, being able to lay down your head at night on the pillow saying, I gave it my all today. Look yourself in the mirror and say, I did my best and I gave it my all. And that's what I think that we ought to be doing and ought to be striving for. So I think that there's nothing wrong with masculinity. I appreciate what was going on. I appreciate the fact that this conversation has been going on for quite some time, and social scientists have known that there's a problem for years. And if men, my biggest issue is if men are opting out, and men are refusing to go to college, they're refusing to graduate from high school, refusing to participate in the labor market, and they're not seeing a need or any type of reward that's been coming for them. Remember, the article that we read said since 1979, men's wages have been increasing while women's have been decreasing while women's have been increasing. And if men are no longer joining the labor market, and if they rather stay home and play video games and they don't want to date anymore, they're getting off of social media and getting off of dating apps. If they refuse to participate in society, what does that leave and make for society? Well, first of all, women won't have anyone to marry. Many of the jobs that traditionally have been held by men will have to be taken over by women. That means construction workers and firefighters and STEM fields. I'm not saying a woman can't do it, but do you want to do it? That's up for you to decide. So listen, I don't think that there's anything wrong with being a man, being the manly man, loving yourself, being a protector of your family, a provider for your family, standing up for the weak, helping the innocent, loving puppies, saving kittens. I think all that is masculine, knowing how to change a tire, all that is masculine and all that. So be the best version of yourself that you can be. And, don't let these individuals talk you out of it. And to the men who are out there, be a man and be an example to the community. As I mentioned, you never know who's looking at you. You never know who's looking at you. And to my own circle of individuals, as I grew up, I had some good role models around me. I still wish that, of course, I had a father to talk to, but hey, listen, it wasn't in the cards. But you still have to be a presence around individuals so that they can look up to you. And you never know who's looking at you, who's trying to emulate you, who's trying to think like you and trying to be like you. You never know. So let me know your thoughts, your opinions. Make sure that you hit that rate button, subscribe, and share. Much love and peace.